Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into my final video of this series that I'm doing where I'm giving you guys 5 players to target late in your fantasy football drafts. I've already done the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver position. If you have not watched those videos, please go back and watch those videos, as well as my year 3 wide receivers to target in your drafts this year. With that being said, I'm going to try to go ahead and dive right into this video for you guys. Now, the tight ends that I chose for today's list, each of them are outside the top 12 on the ADP according to the half point PPR on Fantasy Pros. So all 5 of these tight ends are currently going as tight end 2s. Basically, they're bench options. If you're doing a 10-team league, some of these guys might even go undrafted unless you do play in leagues where your fellow league mates do like to roster 2 tight ends. I'm not a fan of rostering 2 tight ends, and honestly, I'll be honest with you, I'll talk about this more in my tight end tier video, which I'll do in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. I'm probably going to be going after an elite tight end this year. But if I end up, having to wait on my tight end position, these are 5 guys I'm going to have on my radar later in drafts. My number 1 tight end I'm going to speak about was actually the first tight end off the draft board in this past draft back in late April. It's going to be the Chicago Bears rookie tight end Colston Lovelin. He's currently going as the number 14th tight end, and the reason why I like him is just because of Ben Johnson. I would be taking a total dart throw on them. First of all, I liked him going into this draft class. I am a Colts fan. For those guys that are unaware, I was more of a Tyler Warren fan, but I would have been very happy with either Tyler Warren or Colston Lovelin. Warren's going as the 10th tight end off boards based off the current ADP. And here's some reasons why I do like him. First of all, his head coach really talked him up at training camp. I think this was today or yesterday. He raved about Lovelin's work ethic. He said he was in the building all summer. If a coach is talking him up, then he's going to want to help feed him the ball. Now, as far as his targets, he's going to have to compete with DJ Moore, Roma Dunze for most of the targets. They still got Cole Kmet at the tight end position. But if you told me at the end of the year that Colston Lovelin had the most touchdowns for the Bears, that's something that would not shock me. And basically, if I would take him later in my drafts, I would look for him to have a similar success in Johnson's offense as Sam Laporta did, and as a rookie. When Sam Laporta was a rookie in Ben Johnson's offense, he had 86 receptions for 889 yards and 10 touchdowns, which put him at the tight end 1 overall. Now, do I think Colston Lovelin's going to finish as a tight end 1 this year? No, but even if he can have 75% of that success, 75 to 80% of that success, he's going to finish as a top 10 tight end, which is why I would be, if I do miss out on the tight ends I want in my drafts, or if I don't really trust the tight end I drafted, he's a guy I wouldn't mind stashing on my bench and seeing how that situation would work out. My number 2 tight end, I'm going out there in Buffalo. He definitely is coming off a sophomore slump, but Dalton Kincaid for the Bills. Here's a stat about him. If you guys haven't watched my previous videos I've been speaking about, I do collect stats from the past 3 regular seasons combined just to see who has had the production. Dalton Kincaid did pop up in one stat. He actually has, and this is among all the stats I will mention among these players going forward for the rest of this video. These are among tight ends only, but Dalton Kincaid actually has the 8th best receiving success rate with a 57.8% success rate when catching the ball since 2022. Now that's among tight ends only with a minimum of 100 receptions. I do put a limit. That minimum on there, so there is plenty of catches, because obviously if guys are catching like 2 or 3 balls, they're going to have a higher success rate. But yeah, way I view Kincaid right now is after having that sophomore slump, I think he's going to get back on track. I'm a major fan of his talent, and he could see a big year 3 jump. As you guys probably know, I talk about the year 3 wide receivers. Now, tight ends aren't similar to the year 3 explosion in production and in targets, but I can actually see Kincaid having that opportunity to see that major year 3 jump, just because I did talk up Khalil Shakir yesterday, right, where he could get the most targets, but there is a pathway for Kincaid to have the first or second most targets on this team, and I could see him actually having the most touchdowns on this team, because the guys that will probably end up having the most touchdowns for the Bills this year is probably either going to be Kincaid, in my opinion, or if Keon Coleman takes a major year 2 jump. So that's why I'm really high on him. him because I think he's going to catch a lot of touchdowns from Josh Allen. And then I think he does have a ceiling this season to finish as a top 5 fantasy tight end, which is why he would be on my radar late in drafts. My number 3 tight end I'm looking to target, which I think I feel like his ADP is going to slowly rise over this next month, especially if they end up giving him the contract extension prior to the season. But I still do like Isaiah Likely for the Baltimore Ravens. We got to see what he got to do last year when he had the opportunity to produce, and when the previous season too, when Mark Andrews was out with that injury. Now Isaiah Likely also did pop up on my stats among tight ends since 2022. Likely does have the 4th highest yards per reception since 2022. This is a minimum of 100 receptions, but he has an 11.7 yards per yard. He averages yards per reception. He's actually got the tied for the 6th most receiving touchdowns among tight ends since 2022. He's tied for the 6th most receiving broken tackles, which I do like broken tackles because if they can break a tackle, that means they're going to get you even an extra half point to a point or two by doing so. Now, as I mentioned, he is entering the last year of his rookie deal. So if he might get a contract, an extension between now and the start of the season, but if he doesn't, then he's going to want to ball out and go get a huge contract next offseason, which is something that you can do in fantasy football, is look at these guys that are looking to earn a contract in the following offseason. One thing I actually didn't even realize, I found this when I was doing my research for this video, is John Harbaugh, the head coach for Baltimore, actually stated this offseason that he wants to see Likely to become an all-pro this season. Now, that could be coach speak, but if he wants Likely to be an all-pro this season, then he's going to need the targets. He's going to need the receptions and touchdowns. So for that to happen, he's going to have to out-target Mark Andrews. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind when you see Likely on the board. So he does have some competition for targets, though. Obviously, Mark Andrews, they got Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and DeAndre Hopkins. But if you start, he's more of like, put him on your bench at first, right? But if he starts seeing at least 5 to 7 plus targets a game, I think he's going to at least work himself into a weekly starter, and he offers that upside, especially if Harbaugh wants him to be a all-pro tight end this season. Another guy that's coming off a rough season last year, similar to Dalton Kincaid, is the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys, who I like, Jake Ferguson. Some stats that he popped up over the last 3 years. He's actually tied with Likely. He's tied for the 6th most receiving broken tackles since 2022, and he also has the 9th most yards after the catch since 2022. Something that his head coach actually said, I believe it was today, maybe it was yesterday, is he said, Coach Schottenheimer for the Dallas Cowboys said, "I have zero doubts in my mind that his production will get back to really where it was the year before. I think last year was a fluke more than anything." So that's positive that obviously with him saying that, in his mind as the head coach, that he sees Ferguson getting those targets where he's going to be more productive. Now, the obvious is CeeDee Lamb's going to lead this team in targets. George Pickens is likely going to have the 2nd most targets. So you're looking at Ferguson to have the 3rd most targets by the end of the season for the Cowboys. But I think those 2 wide receivers are going to benefit Ferguson so much this year, because when you got players like CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens on the outside, that's going to command the eyes of the safeties on the boundary, and that's going to open up the middle of the field for Ferguson, where if he can get back on track with Dak, especially having Dak back in the lineup, is going to help him be more of a productive tight end. And if his production does return, I can see him sliding in. If his production returns, I can see him finishing close to probably between his ceiling's probably like a tight end 5, tight end 6 overall, but at least a top 10 fantasy tight end this season. Now, this last guy, I know, maybe I can't quit him, but Kyle Pitts. Yes, I am going to speak about Kyle Pitts, the one guy, the one tight end that everybody's given up on, right? But doesn't it seem like, we see this in fantasy, like anytime you give up on a player, that's when he actually shows up. Now, first of all, I want to mention his ADP. Right now, Kyle Pitts is going as the 17th overall tight end. So it's not like you're drafting him very high and being very upset with this. If you draft Kyle Pitts it's going to be like your last round pick. It's going to be a pure dart throw for Kyle Pitts, for a guy that still offers the upside with the talent that he had entering the year. Now, he did pop up on two of the stats that I've collected. He actually has the second highest yards per reception. This is a minimum of 100 receptions among tight ends since 2022. Kyle Pitts averages 12.7 yards per reception. That's over a point every time he catches the ball. And he does have the sixth most yards per catch, which kind of lines up with his yards per reception. So he's getting down the field, he's catching the ball, but you just want to see him break more tackles or create more of those explosive plays. Now, as far as his passing attack, he still has a pathway to get the second most targets on this team. Now, Drake London's going to lead this team in targets, but I'm not really worried about any of the other wide receivers. I think some of those wide receivers on the team had more production with Kirk Cousins until Penix came in. So I think there's a pathway that Pitts would have the second most targets on this team. And if you do take him, you're basically stashing on the bench, and you're betting that him and Michael Penix Jr. are going to develop chemistry. And if that can happen, all of a sudden, if he does deliver on his talent, you got a potential top 10 fantasy tight end this season. One thing to keep in the back of your mind with Kyle Pitts, if you decide to stash him on your bench from drafts this year, is there's still the possible situation they could trade Kyle Pitts. So if Kyle Pitts somehow gets traded to even a better situation where he's going to get featured, I mean, come on, like put him with like Joe Burrow and the Bengals or something like that. Then yeah, all of a sudden maybe maybe a new scenery would help Kyle Pitts become more of a fantasy relevant tight end. But again, like I mentioned with Pitts, I know everybody wants to give up on him. I'm just suggesting him because he's going as the 17th tight end. I mean, it's possible he's going to be on the waivers too after drafts, depending on how your league approaches the tight end position. But yeah, that wraps up my top 5 players to target late in fantasy football draft series. This is the tight end video. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please make sure you do that. Also, follow me on all my other social media platforms. Next time you guys will see me, I'm thinking probably either next Tuesday or Wednesday. If you guys are unaware, if you missed this on my previous videos, I am having to go out of town this weekend for a funeral. That's why I really pumped out these videos at the beginning of this week, so I can at least wrap this series up. I'm gonna come back next week. I think I might talk about kickers. I did that last year after the late round targets, and then I think I'll go into my tiers. I kind of want to at least get through the first 2 weeks of training camp, at least week and a half of training camp, before I dive into my tiers, getting more information as much as possible. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. I'll talk to you next week. Peace out.